Sarah Martinez had always been different from other girls in her small Texas town. While her classmates painted their nails and talked about boys, she spent her afternoons at the local shooting range with her grandfather, learning to handle firearms with precision that amazed even seasoned hunters. Her steady hands and sharp eyes made her a natural marksman, but in 1991, being a female sharpshooter was still considered unusual, especially in the military. When Sarah walked into the Army recruitment office on her 18th birthday, the sergeant behind the desk barely looked up from his paperwork. She had practiced this moment countless times in front of her bedroom mirror, knowing exactly what she wanted to say. Her grandfather, a Vietnam War veteran, had filled her head with stories of courage and sacrifice, and she felt called to serve her country. "I want to enlist," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the nervous energy coursing through her veins. The recruitment sergeant, a middle-aged man with graying temples and tired eyes, finally looked up. His expression shifted from boredom to mild amusement as he took in the petite brunette standing before him. "What kind of job are you thinking about, miss?" he asked, already reaching for brochures about administrative positions and medical corps opportunities. These were the traditional paths for women in the military, safe desk jobs that kept them away from combat zones. Sarah took a deep breath. "I want to be a sniper." The silence that followed was so complete that Sarah could hear the air conditioning humming in the background. The sergeant's pen stopped moving across his paperwork, and he stared at her as if she had just announced her intention to fly to the moon. After what felt like an eternity, he began to chuckle, a low sound that gradually grew into full-blown laughter. "A sniper?" he repeated, wiping tears from his eyes. "Sweetheart, do you have any idea what that job entails? We're talking about carrying 50-pound packs across rough terrain, lying motionless in mud for hours, and making life-and-death decisions under extreme pressure. This isn't some video game." Sarah's jaw tightened, but she maintained her composure. "I've been shooting since I was 8 years old. I can hit a target at 400 yards with iron sights. I've won 3 state-level marksmanship competitions." The sergeant's laughter subsided, but his condescending smile remained. "Listen, I'm sure you're good at target shooting, but military sniping is completely different. It requires physical strength, mental toughness, and emotional stability that, frankly, most women just don't possess. Why don't we look at some more suitable options? The Army has excellent opportunities in communications, logistics, or medical support." Sarah felt her cheeks burn with frustration, but she refused to be dismissed so easily. "I'm not interested in those positions. I want to serve on the front lines. I want to make a real difference." The sergeant leaned back in his chair, his patience clearly wearing thin. "Look, even if I wanted to help you, which I don't, women aren't allowed in combat positions. It's military policy. You can thank politicians and feminists for that one, but the rules are the rules." What the sergeant said was technically true. Official military policy at the time prohibited women from serving in direct combat roles, including as snipers. However, Sarah had done her research and knew there were exceptions and workarounds, especially for soldiers with exceptional skills. She had read about female soldiers who had served in various capacities during previous conflicts, often in unofficial roles that put them in harm's way. "I understand the official policy," Sarah replied, her voice growing firmer. "But I also know that talented soldiers sometimes find ways to serve where they're needed most, regardless of gender. I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking for the chance to prove myself." The sergeant shook his head and returned to his paperwork. "I've heard enough. If you want to join the Army, you'll do it in a position that's appropriate for someone like you. Otherwise, you can try the other branches, but they'll tell you the same thing." Sarah left the recruitment office that day feeling defeated, but not discouraged. Her grandfather had taught her that persistence was often more valuable than talent, and she wasn't about to give up on her dream because one narrow-minded sergeant couldn't see past her gender. Over the following weeks, Sarah visited recruitment offices for all 4 branches of the military. The responses were remarkably similar. Some recruiters were more polite than others, but the message was always the same. Women belonged in support roles, not on the battlefield. One Navy recruiter suggested she consider becoming a photographer, saying she could document the real warriors from a safe distance. Frustrated but not defeated, Sarah decided to take a different approach. Instead of going through normal recruitment channels, she began reaching out to active duty soldiers and veterans through military publications and veteran organizations. Her grandfather's old Army buddies proved particularly helpful, sharing contacts and advice about how to navigate the military bureaucracy. One evening, while Sarah was researching military sniper programs in the library, she came across an article about Fort Bragg's Special Operations Training Center. The piece mentioned a secretive program for developing elite marksmen, with instructors drawn from various Special Forces units. What caught her attention was a brief mention of unconventional recruitment methods and the program's reputation for finding talent in unexpected places. Sarah spent the next 3 days crafting a letter to the program's commanding officer, Major Robert Harrison. She detailed her shooting experience, her physical fitness level, and her unwavering commitment to serving her country. Most importantly, she included copies of her marksmanship competition certificates and a letter of recommendation from her grandfather, who had earned a Silver Star in Vietnam. She mailed the letter on a Friday and spent the weekend anxiously waiting for a response. Her grandfather tried to prepare her for disappointment, gently explaining that military traditions changed slowly and that she might be ahead of her time. But Sarah had inherited his stubborn streak, and she refused to consider failure as an option. The phone call came on Tuesday morning while Sarah was eating breakfast. Her mother answered and called her to the phone with a puzzled expression. The voice on the other end was crisp and professional, belonging to someone who was clearly accustomed to giving orders. "Miss Martinez, this is Sergeant First Class Williams from Fort Bragg. Major Harrison received your letter and would like to speak with you. Can you be here Friday morning at 0800 hours? Sarah's heart skipped a beat. "Yes, absolutely. What should I bring?" "Just yourself and your shooting gear. We'll provide everything else you need." Sarah spent the rest of the week preparing for what might be the most important meeting of her life. She practiced at the range every day, fine-tuning her technique and building her confidence. Her grandfather helped her clean and adjust her rifle, a custom-modified Remington 700 that he had given her for her 16th birthday. The drive to Fort Bragg took 4 hours, and Sarah arrived with 30 minutes to spare. The base was larger and more intimidating than she had expected, with serious-looking soldiers moving purposefully in all directions. She checked in at the visitor center and was escorted to a small office building near the training areas. Sergeant First Class Williams turned out to be a compact, muscular man with intelligent eyes and a firm handshake. He looked Sarah up and down appraisingly, but didn't seem surprised by her appearance. "Major Harrison is running a few minutes late," he explained. "Why don't you tell me a bit about yourself while we wait?" Sarah found herself relaxing as she talked about her background and motivations. Williams asked thoughtful questions about her training routine, her mental preparation techniques, and her understanding of what military service would require. He seemed genuinely interested in her answers, rather than looking for reasons to dismiss her. When Major Harrison finally arrived, Sarah was struck by his presence. He was tall and lean, with gray hair and intense blue eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. There was something about him that commanded respect without saying a word. "Miss Martinez," he said, extending his hand, "I've read your letter and your grandfather's recommendation. He speaks very highly of your abilities." "Thank you, sir. I'm honored that you agreed to meet with me." Major Harrison sat down behind his desk and studied Sarah for a long moment. "I'll be direct with you. What you're asking for is extremely difficult, if not impossible. The military has rules and traditions that don't change overnight. However, I've been in this business for 25 years, and I've learned to recognize exceptional talent when I see it. Sarah felt a flicker of hope. What would I need to do to prove myself? That's the right question, Harrison replied with the ghost of a smile. Most people in your situation ask what's stopping them instead of what they need to do to overcome the obstacles. Sergeant Williams is going to take you to the range. If you can demonstrate the kind of skill your grandfather claims you have, we'll discuss the next steps. The range was unlike anything Sarah had ever seen. Instead of the simple target stand she was used to, there were multiple shooting positions at various elevations, with targets at distances ranging from 200 to 1,000 yards. Several soldiers were already practicing, their rifles equipped with high-powered scopes and other equipment Sarah didn't recognize. Williams handed her a standard military rifle, an M24 sniper weapon system. It was heavier than her custom Remington, but felt familiar in her hands. "We'll start with some basic shots at 300 yards, he said. "Take your time and show me what you can do." Sarah settled into a prone position and adjusted the rifle's scope. She took several deep breaths, allowing her heart rate to slow and her mind to focus. The target seemed miles away, but she could see it clearly through the scope. She squeezed the trigger gently, feeling the rifle recoil against her shoulder. "Dead center," Williams called out, lowering his binoculars. "Not bad for a first shot with an unfamiliar weapon." Sarah's next 4 shots were equally accurate, grouping within a 2-inch circle at the target's center. Williams had her move to different positions and distances, each test more challenging than the last. By the time they finished, a small crowd of soldiers had gathered to watch, their initial skepticism gradually giving way to grudging respect. "I've seen enough," Williams said finally. "Let's go back and talk to the major." As they walked back to the office building, Sarah noticed the other soldiers looking at her with new interest. Word traveled fast on a military base, and her performance at the range had apparently made an impression. She tried to stay focused on the meeting ahead, knowing that the real challenge was just beginning. Major Harrison was waiting for them with a thick folder on his desk. "Sergeant Williams tells me you performed admirably," he said. "Your scores are comparable to what we expect from soldiers who have completed basic marksmanship training." "Thank you, sir." Harrison opened the folder and pulled out several documents. "Here's the situation. Officially, I cannot offer you a position as a sniper. Military policy is clear on that point. However, there are ways to work within the system for soldiers with exceptional abilities." Sarah leaned forward, her attention completely focused on Harrison's words. "There's a specialized training program that operates somewhat outside normal channels. Soldiers in this program receive advanced instruction in marksmanship, reconnaissance, and other special operations skills. Graduates often find themselves in situations where their unique abilities are put to good use, regardless of their official job classification." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. What would that involve? First, you would need to complete basic training and advanced individual training in a standard military occupational specialty. I would recommend military police, which would give you weapons training and law enforcement experience. After that, if you continue to demonstrate exceptional ability and dedication, you might find yourself selected for additional training opportunities. Harrison paused and studied Sarah's face carefully. "I need to be clear about something. This path will be more difficult than anything you can imagine. You'll face skepticism, hostility, and challenges that would break most people. There will be times when you question whether it's worth the struggle. Are you prepared for that?" Sarah thought about her grandfather's stories, the sacrifices he had made, and the pride he took in his service. She thought about all the recruiters who had dismissed her without giving her a chance, and the satisfaction she had felt when her shots found their targets on the range. "Yes, sir. I'm ready." Harrison nodded slowly. "Very well. Sergeant Williams will help you complete the necessary paperwork. Your ship date for basic training will be in 6 weeks. Use that time to prepare yourself physically and mentally. Once you're in the system, everything depends on your performance. As Sarah walked out of the office building that afternoon, she felt as though her life had just taken a dramatic turn. She was still facing an uphill battle, but for the first time since deciding to join the military, she felt like someone was willing to give her a fair chance to prove herself. The drive home seemed shorter than the trip to Fort Bragg, her mind racing with everything she needed to do in the coming weeks. She had 6 weeks to get into the best physical shape of her life and prepare for the challenges ahead. Her grandfather would be proud, she thought, but he would also warn her that the real test was just beginning. That evening, Sarah called her grandfather to tell him about the meeting. His voice cracked with emotion when she described Major Harrison's offer, and she could hear the pride in his words when he told her how much her grandmother would have loved to see this day. "Remember," he said before they hung up, "the military will test more than just your shooting ability. They'll test your character, your determination, and your willingness to sacrifice for something bigger than yourself. If you can pass those tests, the rest will take care of itself." Sarah spent the next 6 weeks in intense preparation. She ran 5 miles every morning, spent hours at the gym building strength and endurance, and continued practicing at the range. She read every military manual she could find and studied the experiences of other soldiers who had overcome seemingly impossible obstacles to achieve their goals. The night before leaving for basic training, Sarah packed her few belongings and wrote a letter to herself, describing her dreams and goals. She sealed it in an envelope and gave it to her grandfather, asking him to give it back to her when she completed her training. "You'll need to remember why you started this journey," he said, placing the letter in his desk drawer. "When things get difficult, and they will, remember that young woman who walked into that recruitment office because she believed she had something valuable to offer her country." As Sarah boarded the bus for Fort Leonard Wood the next morning, she carried with her the hopes and dreams of that 18-year-old girl, along with the knowledge that she had already overcome the first major obstacle in her path. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but she was no longer walking it alone. Basic training at Fort Leonard Wood hit Sarah like a freight train. The first week broke down everything she thought she knew about herself and began building something entirely new. Drill Sergeant Peterson, an imposing man with a voice that could shatter glass, seemed to take particular pleasure in making the female recruits' lives difficult. "Martinez!" he bellowed during the 3rd day of training. "What makes you think you can keep up with these men? You look like a strong wind could blow you away." Sarah stood at attention, staring straight ahead as Peterson circled her like a predator. She had expected this treatment, but experiencing it was different from imagining it. The other recruits watched nervously, grateful that someone else was receiving the drill sergeant's attention. "This soldier believes she has what it takes to be a warrior, drill sergeant," Sarah responded, her voice carrying across the parade ground. Peterson stopped in front of her, his face inches from hers. "A warrior? I see a little girl playing dress-up. You think because you can shoot at paper targets, you're ready for combat? Paper doesn't shoot back, Martinez." The physical training was brutal. Sarah had thought she was in excellent shape, but military fitness was different from civilian athletics. The long runs with full packs, the endless push-ups, and the obstacle courses pushed her body to its limits. Several recruits dropped out during the first month, unable to handle the intensity. What surprised Sarah most was the attitude of her fellow recruits. She had expected some resistance from the male soldiers, but many of them were supportive, especially after they saw her outperform half the company on the rifle range. It was some of the female recruits who proved most hostile, viewing her ambitions as unrealistic and potentially dangerous to their own acceptance in the military. "You're making us all look bad," complained Rebecca Torres, a recruit from California who was training to be a supply specialist. "The drill sergeants are harder on all of us because of your crazy sniper dreams. Why can't you just be normal?" Sarah tried to explain that she wasn't seeking attention or trying to make anyone else's life harder, but Torres and several other female recruits remained resentful. The isolation was harder to bear than the physical challenges, leaving Sarah feeling caught between two worlds and fully accepted by neither. The turning point came during the 4th week of training. The company was participating in a field training exercise, practicing basic infantry tactics in simulated combat conditions. Sarah's platoon was tasked with eliminating an enemy position that had been harassing supply convoys, but their initial assault failed miserably. Platoon Sergeant Rodriguez, a veteran of the Gulf War, called the soldiers together for debriefing. His frustration was obvious as he pointed out the tactical errors that had led to their defeat. "You people are thinking like individuals instead of a team," he said. "In real combat, that kind of thinking gets people killed." During the second attempt, Sarah noticed something that had been overlooked in the first assault. The simulated enemy position had a weakness on its left flank, but it was protected by a sniper who had been picking off anyone who tried to approach from that direction. The platoon's previous attempts had focused on frontal assault, playing directly into the enemy's strengths. "Sergeant Rodriguez," Sarah said during the planning phase, "I think I can neutralize the sniper position and open up that left flank." Rodriguez looked at her skeptically. "Martinez, you're not trained as a designated marksman. That's not your job." "I understand that, Sergeant, but I have the skills to make the shot. If I can take out their sniper, the rest of the platoon can flank the position while they're trying to figure out what happened." After a moment's consideration, Rodriguez nodded. "All right, Martinez, you get one chance. If you miss, we go back to Plan A." Sarah positioned herself on a hill overlooking the enemy compound, roughly 600 yards from the target. The simulated enemy sniper was represented by a balloon that had to be popped with a single shot to count as a kill. She settled into position with her M16, knowing that the standard rifle wasn't designed for such long-range precision work. The shot was more difficult than anything she had attempted in training. Wind was gusting across the range, and she had to account for the different ballistic characteristics of the military rifle compared to her custom weapon back home. She controlled her breathing, steadied her aim, and squeezed the trigger. The balloon popped instantly, and Sarah watched through her sights as the rest of the platoon successfully completed their flanking maneuver. The entire exercise was over in minutes, compared to the prolonged failures of their previous attempts. Rodriguez approached her afterward with a mixture of surprise and respect. "Where did you learn to shoot like that, Martinez?" "My grandfather taught me, Sergeant. He said accuracy was more important than speed." "Your grandfather was smart, man. I'm going to note your performance in my report. That was outstanding marksmanship under pressure." Word of Sarah's achievement spread quickly through the training company. Drill Sergeant Peterson, who had been her harshest critic, began paying her a different kind of attention. Instead of singling her out for ridicule, he started pushing her harder in other areas, as if testing whether her shooting skills were matched by competence in other military disciplines. The change in attitude wasn't universal. Some instructors remained skeptical of female soldiers in general, viewing Sarah's success as a lucky shot rather than genuine ability. But enough people took notice that her name began appearing in unofficial discussions about recruits with special potential. During the final weeks of basic training, Sarah received an unexpected visitor. Major Harrison arrived at Fort Leonard Wood unannounced, requesting a private meeting with her commanding officer. Sarah learned about his visit only when she was called to the company headquarters that afternoon. Captain Williams, the company commander, was a career officer with 20 years of experience. He looked uncomfortable as he briefed Sarah on the meeting. "Miss Martinez, it seems you've attracted some high-level attention. Major Harrison has been following your progress and would like to discuss your future plans." Sarah felt nervous excitement as she was escorted to the meeting room. Major Harrison looked exactly as she remembered him, composed and intensely focused. He gestured for her to sit down across from him. "Your drill sergeants tell me you've been performing well," he began. "Excellent physical fitness scores, outstanding marksmanship, and good leadership potential. How are you feeling about the experience so far?" "It's challenging, sir, but I'm learning a lot. The training has shown me areas where I need to improve, but it's also confirmed that I made the right choice." Harrison nodded approvingly. "I've been reviewing your options for advanced individual training. Your original plan was to train as military police, which would give you good experience with weapons and tactics. However, another opportunity has presented itself." Sarah leaned forward, her attention completely focused. "There's a specialized program starting next month for soldiers with exceptional marksmanship abilities. It's officially part of the military intelligence training pipeline, which would give you a legitimate job classification while providing access to advanced weapons training. The program is small and selective. Are you interested?" Sarah's heart raced. This was more than she had dared to hope for when she first enlisted. "Yes, sir." "Absolutely. The training will be at Fort Huachuca in Arizona. It's more intensive than standard military police training, and the failure rate is high. You'll be working with instructors from special operations units, and they won't give you any special consideration because of your gender. In fact, they'll probably be harder on you than anyone else." "I understand, sir. I'm ready for the challenge." Harrison studied her carefully. "There's something else you should know. This program operates under different rules than standard military training. Students who excel may find themselves assigned to units and missions that don't officially exist. Are you comfortable with that level of ambiguity?" Sarah thought about her grandfather's stories of classified missions and operations that he could never discuss in detail. The military had always been about serving something larger than herself, and she was prepared to go wherever her skills were needed. "Yes, sir. I trust the Army to use my abilities where they'll do the most good." Harrison's expression softened slightly. "Your grandfather would be proud of the soldier you're becoming. I'll submit the paperwork for your transfer to Fort Huachuca. Congratulations, Private Martinez." The remaining weeks of basic training passed quickly. Sarah graduated near the top of her class, earning recognition for her marksmanship and physical fitness scores. But more importantly, she had proven to herself and others that she belonged in the military. The journey to Fort Huachuca took her through landscapes unlike anything she had seen before. The Arizona desert was stark and beautiful, with mountains rising from scrubland under impossibly blue skies. The base itself was smaller than Fort Leonard Wood, but had an atmosphere of serious purpose that was immediately apparent. Sarah's new training company consisted of only 24 soldiers, all of whom had been selected for exceptional skills in various areas. About half were recent graduates of basic training like herself, while the others were experienced soldiers seeking to develop specialized capabilities. There were 3 women in the group, making Sarah feel less isolated than she had during basic training. The commanding officer was Captain Janet Morrison, a compact woman with short blonde hair and intense green eyes. Morrison had served with the 82nd Airborne Division and had earned a Bronze Star for her actions during Operation Desert Storm. Her reputation for demanding excellence was legendary, and Sarah could see why she had been chosen to lead this unconventional program. "This is not standard military training," Morrison explained during their first briefing. "You're here because you've demonstrated abilities that the Army wants to develop further. Some of you will become intelligence analysts, others will join special operations units, and a few might find yourselves in roles that don't have official names." The training was unlike anything Sarah had experienced. Instead of large group exercises, much of the work was individualized, with instructors tailoring programs to each soldier's strengths and weaknesses. Sarah spent hours each day on the range, working with weapon systems she had never seen before and learning techniques that went far beyond basic marksmanship. Her primary instructor was Sergeant First Class David Chen, a soft-spoken man who had served with Army Special Forces in Central America. Chen approached training as both an art and a science, teaching Sarah not just how to shoot accurately, but how to read environmental conditions, calculate complex ballistics problems, and maintain focus under extreme stress. Shooting at targets is easy, Chen explained during one of their sessions. Anyone with decent eyesight and steady hands can learn to hit a bullseye. What separates a real marksman from a hobbyist is the ability to perform when lives are at stake, when you're exhausted and scared, and everything depends on one perfect shot. To develop that kind of mental toughness, Chen put Sarah through scenarios that pushed her to her limits. She learned to shoot accurately after running for miles, while her heart was pounding and her hands were shaking from fatigue. She practiced shooting in darkness, in rain, and in conditions that seemed impossible for precision work. The psychological training was equally demanding. Military psychologists worked with the students to develop the mental resilience needed for high-stress operations. Sarah learned meditation techniques, stress management strategies, and methods for maintaining emotional balance in chaotic situations. One exercise that particularly challenged her involved simulated hostage scenarios where she had to make split-second decisions about when to shoot and when to hold fire. The scenarios were designed to test not just her accuracy, but her judgment and ability to handle the weight of life-and-death decisions. During the 6th month of training, Sarah participated in an exercise that would change the trajectory of her military career. Intelligence agencies had detected a terrorist training camp in a mountainous region that was being used to prepare operatives for attacks on American targets. A joint task force had been assembled to gather intelligence on the camp, but conventional surveillance methods had failed due to the difficult terrain and sophisticated security measures. Captain Morrison briefed Sarah and 2 other advanced students on a reconnaissance mission that would require them to establish observation posts in the mountains overlooking the terrorist camp. Their job would be to gather detailed intelligence on the camp's layout, security procedures, and personnel while remaining completely undetected. "This is not a training exercise," Morrison emphasized. "This is a real-world mission with genuine national security implications. The intelligence you gather will be used to plan future operations that could save American lives." Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness as she prepared for her first operational mission. All of her training had been leading to this moment, and she was determined to prove that she deserved the trust being placed in her. The insertion into the target area was accomplished by helicopter during a moonless night. Sarah and her 2 teammates, both experienced special operations soldiers, hiked through rugged mountain terrain for 6 hours before reaching their designated observation post. They established a camouflage position on a ridge overlooking the terrorist camp, roughly 200 yards from their targets. For 3 days, Sarah maintained constant surveillance of the camp through high-powered scopes, documenting the movements of personnel, identifying key leaders, and mapping the facility's defenses. The work required intense concentration and physical endurance, as she had to remain motionless for hours at a time while fighting off fatigue and the effects of altitude. On the 2nd day, Sarah spotted something that changed the mission's priority. Through her scope, she observed a meeting between the camp's leaders and several individuals who didn't fit the profile of typical recruits. Intelligence analysis later confirmed that these were operatives from a hostile foreign government who were providing advanced training and weapons to the terrorist group. The discovery elevated the mission's importance and led to Sarah being tasked with an additional responsibility. Intelligence officials wanted detailed photographs of the foreign operatives for identification purposes, but the distances involved made conventional photography impossible. Sarah would need to use her marksmanship skills to position a specialized camera system for close-up surveillance. The plan required her to approach within 400 yards of the camp, close enough for the camera system to capture high-quality images, but also close enough to be discovered if she made any mistakes. Sarah spent hours studying the terrain and security patterns before identifying a route that would allow her to reach an optimal firing position without detection. The approach took her most of the night, moving slowly through rocky terrain while carrying 60 pounds of equipment. She reached the target position just before dawn and settled into a concealed firing position behind a large boulder. From this location, she could see the camp's main buildings clearly and had several escape routes if her position was compromised. Over the next 8 hours, Sarah successfully photographed all of the foreign operatives and documented several meetings that provided valuable intelligence about their plans and capabilities. The mission was considered a complete success, and the intelligence she gathered led to the disruption of several planned terrorist attacks. When Sarah returned to Fort Huachuca, she found that her performance had attracted attention from the highest levels of the military establishment. Captain Morrison called her into the office for a private meeting that would determine the next phase of her career. "The intelligence community has taken notice of your work," Morrison began. "Your technical skills are excellent, but more importantly, you've demonstrated the kind of judgment and reliability that special operations depend on. There are people who want to offer you opportunities that most soldiers never see." Sarah felt a surge of pride mixed with apprehension. She had worked toward this moment for over a year, but now that it was happening, the reality felt overwhelming. Morrison continued, "There's a unit that operates under different authorities than standard military organizations. They handle situations that require exceptional skill and complete discretion. The training is more intensive than anything you've experienced, and the missions are more challenging than conventional military operations. Are you interested?" Sarah thought about her grandfather's advice about seizing opportunities when they presented themselves. Everything she had accomplished so far had been preparation for this moment. "Yes, ma'am. I'm very interested." Morrison smiled for the first time since Sarah had known her. "Good. Pack your gear. You ship out tomorrow for a location that doesn't officially exist on any map. From this point forward, your military career follows a different path." As Sarah prepared for her departure from Fort Huachuca, she reflected on how far she had come from that day in the recruitment office when she had been dismissed as unrealistic. The challenges ahead would be greater than anything she had faced, but she felt ready to meet them. Her grandfather had always told her that the measure of a person was how they responded when life demanded their very best, and Sarah was eager to find out what she was truly capable of achieving. The helicopter touched down in a remote area of Nevada, where the landscape looked like the surface of another planet. Sarah stepped off the aircraft into blistering heat, her gear bag slung over her shoulder, and looked around at what would become her home for the next phase of training. The facility appeared to be nothing more than a collection of prefabricated buildings scattered across the desert, but she could sense the intensity that permeated the place. A sergeant approached her, his uniform bearing no identifying patches or unit insignia. "Martinez, I'm Sergeant Kim. Welcome to the ranch. Hope you're ready to work because we don't believe in taking it easy around here." The ranch, as the facility was known to its inhabitants, housed one of the military's most secretive training programs. Students came from all branches of the armed forces, and many had already completed advanced training with elite units. Sarah quickly realized she was among some of the most skilled soldiers in the American military. Her first week was devoted to assessment, with instructors evaluating every aspect of her abilities and mindset. She underwent psychological evaluations that probed her motivations, stress responses, and ethical boundaries. Physical testing pushed her beyond anything she had experienced, combining endurance challenges with complex problem-solving tasks. The marksmanship evaluation was conducted by Master Sergeant Rodriguez, a legend in special operations circles who had served with multiple classified units over a 20-year career. Rodriguez was known for his ability to identify the subtle differences between good shooters and truly exceptional ones. "I've reviewed your file, Martinez," Rodriguez said as they walked to the range. "Impressive scores from Fort Huachuca, but this is different. We're going to see what you can really do when everything is on the line." The shooting challenges were unlike anything Sarah had encountered. Instead of static targets, she faced scenarios that required her to engage multiple moving targets while navigating obstacles and dealing with various distractions. One exercise required her to hit precise targets while suspended upside down from a rope, simulating shooting from an aircraft or building. The most difficult challenge involved shooting in a room filled with smoke and strobe lights, with targets that appeared and disappeared at random intervals. She had to distinguish between targets representing hostiles and those representing innocent civilians, making split-second decisions while her senses were overwhelmed by the chaotic environment. Sarah's performance impressed even the veteran instructors, but she noticed that some of her fellow students seemed resentful of the attention she received. The program included several soldiers from elite units who had expected to be the standout performers, and they didn't appreciate being outperformed by someone they viewed as inexperienced. The tension came to a head during the 4th month of training. Sarah's unit was participating in a complex exercise that simulated a hostage rescue operation in an urban environment. The scenario required precise coordination between multiple teams, with snipers providing overwatch while assault teams cleared buildings. During the planning phase, Sarah identified several tactical problems with the proposed approach. The designated sniper positions offered limited fields of fire, and the assault routes exposed the teams to unnecessary risk. She suggested alternative positions that would provide better coverage and allow for more flexible response to changing conditions. Staff Sergeant Mike Thompson, a former Navy SEAL with an impressive combat record, dismissed her suggestions immediately. "Listen, Martinez, I've been doing this since before you knew what a rifle was. These positions have been tested in real operations and they work." Sarah tried to explain her reasoning, pointing out specific vulnerabilities in the plan, but Thompson and several other students refused to listen. To them, she was still an outsider trying to prove herself at their expense. "You think because you can hit targets on a range you understand real combat?" Thompson continued, his voice loud enough for the entire group to hear. "This isn't a marksmanship competition. This is about life and death and following the lead of people who know what they're doing." The exercise proceeded according to the original plan, and the results were disastrous. The assault teams were pinned down by simulated enemy fire from positions that Sarah had identified as threats. 2 teams suffered heavy simulated casualties, and the mission was declared a failure after 6 hours of frustration. During the after-action review, the instructors methodically identified the same tactical errors that Sarah had pointed out during planning. The designated sniper positions had indeed been inadequate, and the assault routes had been predictable and dangerous. The lesson was clear to everyone. Personal pride and unwillingness to consider new ideas had led to mission failure. Master Sergeant Rodriguez pulled Sarah aside after the review. "Your tactical analysis was correct," he said quietly. "The question is, what are you going to do with that knowledge?" Sarah thought carefully before answering. "I'm going to continue doing my job to the best of my ability, regardless of whether anyone wants to listen." Rodriguez nodded approvingly. "Good answer. The best soldiers focus on mission success, not personal recognition." The incident marked a turning point in Sarah's relationships with her fellow students. Some began to respect her tactical insights and sought her input on planning future exercises. Others remained hostile, viewing her success as a threat to their own status in the program. The final exercise of the advanced training program would test everything the students had learned over the past year. Intelligence agencies had identified a group of foreign operatives who were planning to infiltrate a sensitive military installation. Rather than using standard security measures, the military decided to use the exercise as a real-world test of the ranch's training methods. The scenario was complex and realistic. The foreign operatives were played by experienced intelligence officers who had extensive training in infiltration techniques. They would attempt to penetrate the installation's defenses and gather classified information, while the students worked to detect and neutralize the threat. Sarah was assigned to a sniper team tasked with providing overwatch for the installation's perimeter. Her partner was Specialist Jake Morrison, a former Army Ranger who had initially been skeptical of her abilities, but had come to respect her tactical knowledge. "This is as close to real combat as we're going to get without actual bullets flying," Morrison told her as they established their position. "These intelligence guys are good, and they're going to try every trick they know." The exercise began at sunset, with the infiltration team attempting to penetrate the installation under cover of darkness. Sarah and Morrison established multiple observation posts, using night vision equipment and thermal imaging to monitor the approaches to the facility. For the first several hours, everything appeared normal. Security patrols moved according to their assigned routes, and electronic sensors showed no signs of intrusion. But Sarah noticed subtle changes in the patterns of wildlife movement that suggested human presence in areas that should have been empty. "Something's not right," she whispered to Morrison through their communication system. "The animal movements in Sector 7 are all wrong. There's definitely someone out there." Morrison checked his own equipment but couldn't detect anything unusual. "I'm not seeing anything on thermal or night vision. You sure you're not seeing things?" Sarah studied the area more carefully through her scope. She couldn't see the intruders directly, but the indirect signs of their presence were clear to someone who had spent countless hours observing natural environments. Birds were avoiding certain areas, and the normal sounds of nocturnal animals had changed in ways that indicated human disturbance. "I'm requesting permission to take a closer look," Sarah said into her radio. The response came from Captain Brooks, the exercise controller. "Negative, Overwatch 2. Maintain your assigned position and continue surveillance." Sarah felt frustrated by the order, knowing that the infiltrators were using the time to get closer to their objective. But she followed orders and continued monitoring from her position, hoping that other teams would detect the threat before it was too late. An hour later, alarms began sounding throughout the installation. The infiltration team had successfully penetrated the inner perimeter and was attempting to access a classified computer system. The exercise was effectively over, with the defenders having failed to detect the threat until it was too late to respond effectively. During the debriefing, it became clear that Sarah's early warning about activity in Sector 7 had been accurate. The infiltration team had used that area as a staging point for their final approach, and earlier detection might have prevented their success. Captain Brooks addressed the assembled students with obvious frustration. "This exercise demonstrates the cost of failing to trust your instincts and the value of thorough observation. Specialist Martinez identified suspicious activity early in the exercise, but we failed to act on that intelligence effectively." The criticism stung, particularly for the students who had performed poorly, but it also highlighted Sarah's developing reputation as someone whose tactical insights were consistently accurate. Following the completion of advanced training, Sarah expected to receive her next assignment and begin her operational career. Instead, she was called to a meeting with Colonel James Harrison, Major Harrison's superior officer, who had flown in specifically to discuss her future. "You've impressed a lot of people during your time here," Colonel Harrison began. "Your technical skills are outstanding, but more importantly, you've demonstrated the kind of tactical intuition that can't be taught. We have an opportunity that might interest you." Sarah listened as Harrison described a new program that was being developed to address emerging threats that didn't fit traditional military responses. The unit would be small, highly trained, and capable of operating independently in situations where conventional forces would be inappropriate or ineffective. "The work would be dangerous and largely unrecognized," Harrison explained. "There would be no medals or public acknowledgement for what you accomplish, but you would be making a real difference in protecting American interests around the world." Sarah had come too far to hesitate now. "I'm interested, sir. What would be my role?" "Initially, you would serve as a sniper and reconnaissance specialist. However, we're looking for people who can grow into leadership positions as the unit develops. Your combination of technical skills and tactical thinking makes you an ideal candidate. The new unit was based at a facility in Colorado that was even more secretive than the ranch. Sarah's team consisted of 8 specialists drawn from various backgrounds, including special operations, intelligence, and technical fields. Their first mission would serve as both a training exercise and a real operational test. An international arms dealer had established a heavily fortified compound in a remote area of Eastern Europe where he was developing weapons systems that could potentially be used against American forces. Intelligence agencies needed detailed information about his activities, but the compound's location and security made conventional surveillance impossible. Sarah's team was tasked with infiltrating the area and gathering the necessary intelligence without detection. The mission would require them to operate independently for several weeks in hostile territory, with no possibility of support or extraction if things went wrong. The insertion was accomplished using a high-altitude parachute drop during a moonless night. Sarah and her teammates landed in a mountainous region 30 miles from the target compound and began a difficult overland movement through terrain that challenged even their advanced training. They established an observation post in caves overlooking the compound, carefully concealing their presence while maintaining constant surveillance. Sarah's job was to photograph key personnel and document the movement of materials and equipment that might indicate the type of weapons being developed. For 2 weeks, the mission proceeded according to plan. Sarah gathered extensive intelligence about the compound's activities and identified several foreign military advisors who were providing technical expertise to the arms dealer. The photographs she captured would later lead to the identification of a sophisticated weapons development program that posed a significant threat to American forces worldwide. On the 14th day of the mission, everything changed. A patrol from the compound discovered evidence of the team's presence and began an intensive search of the surrounding area. Sarah and her teammates found themselves trapped in their observation post, surrounded by hostile forces who were systematically checking every possible hiding place. The team leader, Master Sergeant Collins, made the decision to attempt a breakout rather than wait to be discovered. The plan was risky, but offered their only chance of escape. Sarah would provide cover fire while the rest of the team moved to an extraction point several miles away. As the team prepared to move, Sarah realized that her standard rifle was inadequate for the challenge ahead. The distances involved and the need for absolute precision required capabilities that went beyond conventional weapons. She needed something special. "Collins," she said, "I need to request a different rifle for this operation." The other team members looked at her with surprise and skepticism. They were in a desperate situation with enemy forces closing in, and she was making equipment requests. "Martinez, this isn't the time for special orders," said Sergeant Williams, shaking his head. "We use what we brought. With respect, the rifle I have won't reliably hit targets at the distances we're facing. If I'm going to provide effective cover, I need something with more capability." The other soldiers began to mock her request, their stress and fear expressing itself as derisive laughter. They couldn't understand why she thought her weapon wasn't sufficient for someone who had been claiming to be such an exceptional shooter. "Oh, now she needs a special rifle to do her job," Williams said sarcastically. "What's next? A personal assistant to carry her gear?" "Maybe she thinks she's too good for military equipment," added another team member. "Needs something custom-made for the princess." Sarah felt her face burn with embarrassment and anger, but she maintained her composure. These men's lives might depend on her ability to provide accurate cover fire, and she couldn't let pride interfere with mission success. Master Sergeant Collins had been listening to the exchange with a thoughtful expression. As the senior member of the team, he had access to special equipment that wasn't available to standard military units. He had been observing Sarah's performance throughout their training and deployment, and he had come to trust her judgment completely. Collins walked to his equipment pack and retrieved a rifle case that Sarah had never seen before. The case was longer and heavier than standard military weapons, and it bore no identifying markings. "Give her the black Talon," Collins said quietly. The other team members fell silent immediately. The Black Talon was legendary among Special Operations Forces, a custom-built rifle system that was used only by the most elite snipers in the military. It was capable of accuracy that bordered on the impossible, but it required extraordinary skill to use effectively. Collins opened the case to reveal a rifle unlike anything Sarah had ever seen. The Black Talon was a work of art as much as a weapon, with a barrel that seemed to absorb light and optics that looked like they belonged on a spacecraft. Every component had been precision manufactured to tolerances that exceeded civilian understanding. "This rifle has been used by fewer than a dozen people in its entire history," Collins explained as he handed it to Sarah. "It's capable of hitting a target at ranges that most people consider impossible, but only in the right hands. Don't make me regret this decision." Sarah accepted the rifle with appropriate reverence, understanding that she was being trusted with one of the military's most closely guarded secrets. The weapon felt different from anything she had ever held, perfectly balanced and crafted with an attention to detail that spoke of extraordinary capabilities. As she familiarized herself with the Black Talon's controls and characteristics, Sarah felt a calm confidence settle over her. This was the moment that all of her training had been preparing her for, and she was ready to prove that the trust being placed in her was justified. The breakout operation began at dawn, with Sarah positioned on a ridge overlooking the compound, while her teammates moved toward the extraction point. Through the Black Talon's advanced optics, she could see enemy soldiers positioning themselves to intercept the escaping Americans. The first shot was at a distance of nearly 200 yards, far beyond the range of conventional military rifles. Sarah studied the environmental conditions carefully, calculating wind speed, humidity, and elevation differences that would affect the bullet's trajectory. When she squeezed the trigger, the rifle fired with a sound like controlled thunder. The target dropped instantly, never knowing what had hit him. Sarah quickly shifted to the next threat, then the next, systematically eliminating enemy positions that could threaten her teammates' escape route. The Black Talon performed flawlessly, each shot finding its target with precision that seemed almost supernatural. By the time Sarah's teammates reached the extraction point, she had eliminated 8 enemy soldiers and disrupted the entire search operation. The arms dealer security forces retreated in confusion, unable to understand how their positions were being compromised by an unseen enemy. The helicopter extraction was completed without incident, and Sarah's team returned to their base with intelligence that would prevent significant threats to American forces. But more importantly for Sarah personally, she had proven that her abilities were worthy of the trust that had been placed in her. During the mission debriefing, Master Sergeant Collins made it clear that Sarah's performance had exceeded all expectations. "The Black Talon has been used by some of the best snipers in military history," he said. "Martinez used it like she was born to hold that rifle." Colonel Harrison reviewed the mission reports personally and made a decision that would change Sarah's military career permanently. She was designated as one of the primary users of the Black Talon system and assigned to missions that required the absolute highest level of marksmanship skill. Over the following months, Sarah participated in operations that took her to remote locations around the world. She provided overwatch for diplomatic meetings, eliminated high-value targets who threatened American interests, and gathered intelligence in situations where conventional methods had failed. Her grandfather passed away during this period, but not before learning about her achievements. Although he could never know the specific details of her work, he understood that she had found her place in the military and was making the kind of contribution that he had always believed she was capable of achieving. The letter that Sarah had written to herself before leaving for basic training was returned to her after her grandfather's funeral. Reading her own words from years earlier, she was struck by how naive her younger self had been about the challenges she would face. But the determination and sense of purpose that had driven her to enlist remained unchanged. Sarah Martinez never became a household name or received public recognition for her achievements. The nature of her work required anonymity and secrecy that precluded normal military honors. But she had achieved something more valuable than fame, the knowledge that she had found her calling and was making a real difference in protecting her country. The Black Talon remained her constant companion throughout her military career, a symbol of the trust and responsibility that had been placed in her hands. Each time she held the rifle, she remembered the moment when Colonel Harrison had quietly overruled her critics and given her the chance to prove herself. Years later, when Sarah trained new snipers for special operations units, she always emphasized the importance of trusting skilled soldiers regardless of their background or appearance. She had learned firsthand that exceptional ability could come from unexpected sources, and that the military's greatest strength lay in recognizing and developing talent wherever it was found. The young woman who had been laughed out of a recruitment office had become one of the most skilled and trusted operators in the American military. Her journey proved that determination, skill, and the support of visionary leaders could overcome any obstacle, no matter how insurmountable it might initially appear.